Thank you very much for having me. So I am going to start off by asking a few questions. I'm curious, how many of you voted in the last election that your country had? Show of hands. All right, that is almost everyone in the room. Maybe not one person. How many of you have ever weighed in with a public official on a piece of policy or regulation or legislation? Okay. In this room, that's probably about half. How many of you feel that government delivers services thoughtfully and efficiently? All right, not a good room for government. How many of you feel that you have a voice in your government, an effective voice in your government? Okay, small handful. Last question. How many of you paid taxes last year? All right. So there you have it. I think for many people, paying taxes is one of the most consistent interactions that they have with their government. And government touches our life in so many ways. But many people, and clearly many of the people in this room, don't feel connected to their government. People feel disconnected to the government. And more than that, I think people feel like government is broken. The Pew Center did some research here in the United States and found that only 20% of Americans trust that government will do the right thing most of the time. Only 20%. That is the lowest level of trust in government in 50 years. And that is a real problem. I think we saw a visceral reaction to that here in the United States just a couple of days ago. But it's definitely not an issue just in the United States. I think it's an issue around the world, and it's one that clearly needs to be addressed. So I think the question is, how do you fix that? I think, in the United States, given the outcome of the election, it may well be a different group of people that feel like they don't have a voice in the government anymore. But regardless of outcomes, the lack of connection to government is a real problem. And as I said, it's a problem not just in the United States, but it's a problem around the world. So let's think for a moment about how we interact today with businesses and with family and friends. Because I think that is an area where we are used to having constant communication. We're used to having instant feedback. We are used to getting quick explanations of what went wrong and why. Technology has given us a voice in many parts of our daily life in a way that was not true just a few years ago. But if you contrast that with how people interact with government, people don't feel like they have a voice in their government. People don't have that kind of communication with their government. I think many people feel like government is something that happens to them, not something that happens because of them or with them. And regardless of who is governing, the fact that government is viewed as exclusionary and inefficient is a real concern. So how do we address this? There's a set of principles that I've been working on with a number of academics and business leaders and thought leaders, and the essence of them is to try to get the government connected back to the governed. So at the heart of them is the idea of having true citizen-centered government. And more specifically, they're focused on three things. First is a government where every voice can be heard. Second is a government that is focused on delivering real successes, not rules-based checklist compliance. And third is a government that is flexible enough and self-critical enough to be able to revisit decisions it's made and programs that it runs and fix them if they're not working. So a government that is inclusive, a government that delivers, and a government that learns from itself and improves. So why am I talking about this here, where I am, quite literally and figuratively as far from Washington, D.C. as I could be? It's because these principles were inspired by a technology mindset. And specifically, they were inspired by Agile software development. With many of the people in this room know that Agile software development is a construct for developing software that is focused on being collaborative and iterative. Now, obviously, government is a very, very different thing than software development. But we believe that these are principles that can be extracted from and changed and modified to government to make it work better. And we're seeing governments already doing things that are similar to Agile or are based on Agile. So I'll give a couple examples. One of them is very close to where we sit today. In Santa Clara County, they have a program where they're using an algorithm to determine who is most at risk for being homeless in the future. and then delivering services to those people before they fall into that situation. So they are not only delivering better care to their citizens, but it has the happy effect of also being a more efficient allocation of resources in terms of their budget. Mexico City has started something called the Innovation Lab, where they're bringing people together from a whole set of diverse backgrounds focused on trying to deliver citizen services better. In the government of Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau has made it a priority for his government to make government more inclusive, to make sure there are more voices at the table, to try to engage and increase the levels of civic participation. So there are aspects of this happening already, but clearly it's an area where we need to do more. The deficit in trust that exists between the government and its citizens is an issue that has to be addressed. Now, it is true, as I said, that developing software is very different from being in government. And I did many, many years in public service, so I have a sense, a very clear and real sense of how far we have to go in government to try to regain the trust that has been lost. And it is also true that, as President Obama said recently, the government will never run like Silicon Valley because the government is messy. It is also true, as President Obama said just yesterday, that democracy is contentious and hard. That is true. It is very true. It may feel particularly true at this moment, but that does not also mean that we can't start trying to fix some of these problems. And I think if we can bring a technology mindset to some aspects of government, we can go far in terms of bringing citizens back to the center of government, which is where they belong. Thank you very much. David, you have been one of the people helping me think about this, so I want to thank you not just for the spectacular conference that you put on, but also for your input and expertise as we've been working on this project.
Thank you for ending with such a nice thing.